Hi, welcome to GenAI Live. My name is Wayne Sachs. I am a partner solutions architecture leader here at AWS, and we're really excited to have you today. With us is Brian Terry. Brian,
Hey, my name is Brian Terry. I'm a senior specialist SA in GenAI, and I'm super excited to be here just chatting about GenAI. If this is your first time joining us on GenAI Live, we welcome you, and we hope that you come back every day, every Wednesday at 8 a.m. So, how are you doing today, Wayne?
I'm doing well. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great. I just, decided yesterday I was just jump into my computer, and this is just where I live now. So I just
No, I'm actually jealous of your background. I wish that I could have had it. We have a snow day. I live in Washington, D.C. It's like, we got a bunch of snow last night, so I'm stuck in my otherwise dreary office um, while everybody else is sledding, which seems like a lot of fun.
yeah.
But actually, this is even more fun for those of us in the space. I think we have a really great show today, and I'm looking forward to hearing from some of our partner guests who are going to tell us about how they make use of generative AI and AI technologies to help our mutual customers and clients sort of navigate this new world of generative AI, or at least it feels new. Although I guess it's like now it's old. It's not old. It's new. There's all kinds of stuff happening all the time.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I think what we talked about last week it may be old. I don't know. This space is moving so fast, but it's an exciting time to actually see this technology grow and thrive. Huh? So
Yeah,
yeah,
it is. Should we do it? Should we kick this off with our first guest?
sure. Let's bring him in. So let's bring in our first guest. Welcome, Travis.
Hey guys, how you
Travis,
doing?
good to
Great.
see you.
How would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey everybody, my name is Travis Rail. I'm the CTO at Innovative Solutions. We're a premier tier Amazon partner, and we're also the first Amazon partner to receive the generative AI competency in North America. So we have a long-standing history and relationship with Anthropic and other vendors. Super excited to talk to you guys about Gen AI. We do tons of it. So lots of interesting, fun learnings and mistakes we've made along the way.
Wow, that's super interesting that you were one of the very first competency partners. I mean, that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
lot of work. I mean, be able to do a whole auditing process. There's people here like poking at us, like, "Are you doing the right things?" Like, "I promise we were." And so yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. So
So,
we're
I'm going to take it.
no, you go ahead. I was glad to see
You were Anthropic's first SI partner, which we talked about a little bit before. Like before we get into the other stuff,
Yeah,
I would love to hear a little bit about how and why. Maybe the
yeah,
why is even more important than the how. Like why that became a big part of your business a while back, maybe before the explosion occurred.
yeah. Be honest with you, it was a little bit of luck and good timing and a little bit of foresight, and typically good decisions are a combination of those things. For us, we had a opportunity where we were seeing GPT-2 at the time come out. We were trying new and different things related to it. And myself and a few others were like, this is really interesting. At the time, we're making some terrible Terraform scripts coming out of it. Like, it did not work. And we're like, we saw the possibility. This is 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, something of that nature. And we loved sort of the outcome of it, but there wasn't an Amazon alignment at the time. When the Anthropic team branched out of OpenAI, and they sort of did their own thing, and then Microsoft invested in OpenAI, we kind of sat there, we said, Amazon has to make a bet at some point, right? Who is the most logical team they would bet on? So they can be OpenAI because of Microsoft. So we got introduced to the Anthropic team when they were really small, to some of their sales leadership and more. And we said, hey, we're interested in being a partner for you and learning about your tech stack and what you're going to do. We started that out. And what's funny is probably a few months goes by and then Amazon drops the announcement that you guys are investing in Anthropic. And we had all these people from AWS and your partner network saying, who knows this tech? Who knows this tech? And we kind of like sat there, we kind of slowly raised our hand. Like, oh, we kind of stumbled into this as a result of that. So our journey from that point forward has been heavily in this space. We do everything from document processing to multimodal applications to different types of search appliances, We do your occasional chatbot if people really desire it. So we have a lot of different applications for the technology, and we've learned a lot of sort of weird nuances along the way as a result.
So you guys were founded a good time ago, and I see that you have a number of competencies. So it looks like you are able to help businesses, whether they're small and big, across their whole kind of cloud journey, including AI. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like belabor it, but we're a premier tier partner. We got to do a lot of different things. So we have an entire migrations team. We have a strong presence in data ETL services. We build a lot of SaaS applications. Our typical target customer is someone who desires to build something cool or interesting. That's like my barometer. And to get there, they want to move some of their data to AWS to make it easier to manage, right, as they sort of build out that tech stack. People who care about technology in that way and feel like they should invest in it are a perfect sort of persona that we look for to work with. We meet lots of companies who just want to move information to AWS but not do anything with it. We love to do things with it.
So one of the things that like I've definitely encountered with talking with partners, with customers, and this has been true for the last 18 plus months is there's a desire to like get moving. There's a little bit of hesitance to make a bad decision. It like sort
Hmm.
of ignorance or not ignorance,
Yeah,
like lack of comfort maybe slows people down. Feel like maybe they're locking themselves into a design pattern or a thing that they don't know how much technical debt they're taking on, sort
sure.
of walking into the unknown, right? And um and so they like sometimes it's like, okay, well, let's pause and wait for the world to slow down.
Yeah,
And then, but of course, this isn't slowing down. This is just going faster. And so now it's like ever another moment has slipped by to like jump in.
yeah.
I'm sure you see that as much as I do.
Oh yeah.
And
I
and I'm
mean, all the
sure
time.
you've thought about like the whys and then the how's how do we help our customers like move past that?
Yeah, I mean, how I think about it is this: a lot of companies we work with have lots of ideas, and they don't know what's the right one for them. And so what they oftentimes do is they say, I'm going to put dollars aside, or like you got two heroes on a team who are going to I'm going to spend nights and weekends, and they can only get through so many of those ideas, right? And if you do two and neither of them land, right, the business kind of looks at it and says, I don't know if I want to keep spending time and effort on 3, 4, 5 until you find something that is useful for you, quite frankly. So we spend at Innovative a ton of time up front figuring out what's the benefit, right? It may seem really cool to have a chatbot, but then you realize that no one's going to use it, and like, why would you spend the time to implement it, right? Versus something else. So we spend time and have patterns that we've built out. We've got different packages we have for different types of scenarios. So we sort of pull off the truck and customize for somebody. But really, the ultimate goal is to help them see maybe there's like 10 or 20 different ideas they could try really quickly, right? And then there's one diamond in the rough that's worth investing in.
So how do you
So
how do
you
you help them get to that diamond in the rough? Oh, sorry, Brian. That's my question, but you can ask yours
no,
first.
Yeah,
no, go ahead. That's a good follow up. Yeah, actually.
that's how we help them. So
Yeah.
what's interesting to me is that it's usually the technologists who are like, this is the coolest stuff. Like, I want to do more of it. Like, they're the ones who are saying the thing, right? But they also don't control the use case at the end of the day. It's typically like a sales, marketing, product team. So there's like this communication sort of gap that forms between what's possible and then like sort of what's reality, right? And what we found is that when we taught the technologists, you teach them all the interesting ways you can implement it, from document processing to generating audio to making clips and whatever else, right, that you want to have in a system. The technologist gets excited, but someone has to translate that to a product person who may not understand the tech yet. And that piece of it in particular is where we spend a lot of our time of just translating the business use case from the technology's viewpoint. A lot of people come at this from the perspective of, I'm going to build an AI thing, and they kind of forget the why it matters to the people you're building it for. We spend our time helping do that translation, because the way you manage to it today, the way you build to it today, how you estimate your costs that are going to be on it, how you estimate or define the sort of user experience that comes with different implementations. People don't know all the patterns yet, but we have a lot of sort of mind share that we can impart.
Yeah. So I know you talked a little bit about the possibilities of AI.
Yeah.
Specifically, I know we've seen a lot of people use chatbots, and chatbots have been around for a while. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about what some innovative things you're helping companies do with AI that
Yeah.
are other than chatbots?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to talk for first. Let me describe why I don't like the chatbot side of it, and then I will tell you why I like the other side of it. Right? It's really
Travis, I've never
simple.
known you to not be opinionated,
Yeah.
so
I'm
you know.
super straightforward. Right? It's really straightforward. Humans do weird things. When you go to IHOP and you got a menu of 50 pancakes, there's people who sit there and they kind of like, I want that one or I want that. When they order something and they kind of regret it, right? I don't know how many times that's happened in my life. I've been there with somebody. Um, Chatbots are the same experience because you give it an open-ended platform for people to ask questions or to perform actions or go do a thing. And oftentimes people order the wrong pancake. And so they get a bad sort of taste in their mouth, and their experience sort of starts high and ends low, and sort of there's an inconsistency that is driven by that experience. So what we've found to be really successful, right, for businesses and for companies is really more either LLM infused workflow systems, input systems, systems that kind of work behind the scenes that drive a more dynamic experience, something that you can put, I don't want to say on guardrails because that's also like a keyword right in the space, but something that you can put sort of like dimensions around for what's good and what's bad, where you can control the experience for the user and still give them that sort of dynamic feeling of an LLM or an AI agent or otherwise doing work for you on your behalf. We're seeing a ton of companies adopt that methodology because they can trust the outcome that it's going to have, and they can control the customer, the sort of user pleasantry experience that goes into it. That means there's things like document processing systems. We're doing a ton of those projects today. We're seeing a ton of like semantic search systems to replace traditional search systems in the market. Stuff like that we're seeing more of that is less chatbot, more guardrailed, purpose-driven workflows.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
that's
so that honestly that mirrors a lot of my experience too, and I think we are like chatbots are the obvious, like they're sort of
Yeah, it's
in
a
your
poster
face,
child.
right? But I think the real sort of transformative value is all of the stuff that none of us will ever see, right?
Oh yeah.
As like an end user, and that's where I think the interesting space is going to happen. And I know that you've got some. I want you to show us a little bit about what you've built to help
Sure.
accelerate that side of the business or of the
Okay.
technical exploration journey.
Yeah.
But when you're doing it, I want you to really focus on like why you did the things you did,
Sure.
because for our listeners here, like they're trying to figure out like their own journey, and I think the why is going to help them get there.
Yeah. So I'll give you a scenario, and then I will show you something that we can translate to the scenario. So it's a real customer scenario for us. I can't say the name, but if you came into me in an email, I can share with you a private thing, right? Uh, we meet a lot of companies that have KPIs and goals. Who doesn't have that, right? And so they all get flooded with dashboards and Excel files and all this just sort of crud. All right. And then you have to go to like a business analyst. They have to make you the quick site dashboard. They have to like go do a thing over here. And that takes cycles of time and people. A lot of people then said the natural next was put a chatbot on my dashboard. But once again, better know how to ask the right questions of it to derive insightful information. So one of the things we built for this customer was an agent platform that sits on top of their data structure. And on a cadence, I think it was weekly offhand, so it wasn't too noisy. On a cadence, it goes in and inspects the data. And it inspects it based off of the business KPIs. What are you being measured on this month? What are the goals for the quarter, goals for the year, whatever the things would be. It has those goals. It plans out how it's going to go collect data from your data sources that then solves or can answer to those goals. It goes and processes things into a nice format, which then sends an email of that content to the executive team. And the executive team can then say, oh, here's insights I'm receiving. And then we provide a one button press link to QuickSight for them to have that particular viewpoint, right? So now instead of someone being said, here's your menu, we're saying, here's the 5 most popular things. Which one are you interested in, right? Oh, you see that one in particular, we show you all the ingredients, and then you can customize that particular thing. one of the ways we came to this idea is through iteration, right, with our customers. So we built a platform where we put together the best in breed open source technologies. We figured out the ways to harden them for Amazon. We figured out how to make them extendable into our customers' environments and more. And we call that Tailwinds. It's our SaaS platform. You can go see it at tailwindsai.com if you're curious. But I'll show you that here in a screen. So this is Tailwinds. Tailwinds is a workflow no-code builder. You can literally build, I mentioned proof of concepts and use cases. You can literally build a use case in under a minute. Like we even have patterns and templates for you. If you can't build something under a minute, I'll eat a shoe. Like you should be able to do it. The scenario you're seeing here
sounds like a challenge, Travis.
I'll do the thing.
What kind of shoe are we talking about? Like
it's gonna be made of cake,
large?
right? One of those like nice cake shoes. What you see here on the screen though is a workflow system we built, and it's really an agent, and it's hooked up to Amazon Bedrock. And what it has access to is the new Nova Pro model. The use case here is research on the internet for a particular topic at the end of the day. Now you can imagine this being, instead of it on the internet, it's research into your data structure, your data lake, maybe a collection of tables or otherwise. And in the use case I described to you, taking that content and making a nice email out of it, and then sending the email to other people. Expect this to think of this like an AI pipeline. So what you have on the screen is a node for Amazon Bedrock. We have a node for Exasearch, which is a very popular internet search system for agents. I highly recommend them. They're super great. There's a thing called buffer memory, and all these things come together for an agent. An agent has access to a tool, Exasearch, to go and perform work. This could be a database, could be an API, could be whatever you want. It has access to a model, Bedrock, and has access to memory so that it can store and understand over time information it finds on the internet so that it can compute your answer. Just for 2 seconds, people get confused as to how this works behind the scenes. When you talk to an LLM, like you call Bedrock, and it gives you an answer, the answer may be incomplete, right? In the case of searching the internet, you actually call it multiple times. Maybe one time to figure out what's the right search parameters you want to have. The second time is a performance of search. The third time is now it has the search results. Now compute the answer or the output you're looking for. So it's a sort of iterative cycle. And it uses memory to sort of store those sequences as it goes through the process. We have lots of other components. These are some of the ones I shared real quick from different types of models, different types of agents, different types of tools. There's like 50 or 60 offhand, all the heavy hitters and greatest sets you'd expect to see to integrate with. But once you have it built out, you have a question?
No, keep going.
Okay. Yeah. So once you have it built out, you can test it. So we have a little input box. You can also do this through the API, and you can say something like research automotive trends. Via zoom in here. Research automotive trends in for 2025. That's it. You hit go. Cross my fingers for live demos. And it's what the agent's going to do is it's going to first go on the internet, right, using Exasearch. It's going to compute different search queries. I'll show you the results of that once it's done. And it's going to then provide me search results. All right. So it went on the internet. Here's results from Exa. You can see the inputs, the automotive trends for 2025. It went on the internet and found this material, a whole bunch of material. I'm not going to read it to you. Uses that information to compute an answer. Now you can imagine for a moment, you could then chain this to another prompt that says, convert this content into a nicely formatted email to, Mary from accounting or whatever, right? Once you have that structure defined, which isn't a ton of work, you can then integrate it right into your library of choice, right? So you can come in here, you can then make an API request. Maybe it's part of a Lambda, maybe you're doing it as a part of a separate application. Or otherwise, and it can go off, do a thing, come back, and then you can finish it in your pipeline for whatever use case it's going to be. At Innovative, our team uses this to POC customer projects in literal minutes. You got an idea, we'll talk to you. Instead of being like, oh, we'll give you a SAL, we'll go figure it out together. Like, no, my team's going to pull up this product for our system, and we're going to stub it out on the phone call. Does this work? This is not. How does it feel? We're going to try on the shoe. So that's Tailwinds in a nutshell. We provide templates, we provide integrations. You can do not just one agent, you can do multi-agent systems. You can get super complex of it. If you care to be, you can monitor it, all this different stuff.
Super interesting. Are you able to define your own prompt templates for different?
Yeah. So in these different parameters, you can define different customization options. So for example, you can define temperature and how many tokens and does it stream or not responses. You can define prompts for different agents. You can create variables if you wanted to get fancy with it. You can then oftentimes as a developer, you are making variables and you're then calling those variables from your API and changing them on the fly. So yeah, you can do all that stuff.
Interesting. Very cool.
So there was like a little bit of chatter in the comments up above. They wanted to understand a little bit more about the data side, right? Like this is super cool. We also recognize that like this doesn't exist as like a corporate value unless it has good access to the corporate data. So tell me a little bit about like how you wrangle that in the story of generative AI.
So when it comes to this is reality for a moment, right? Everybody's data is still look gross. It's just cut to the chase, right? It's all weird formats. Maybe someone has, oftentimes we find that one team owns the storage of that data and another team owns what physically gets stored inside of it, right? Like you may have a bucket, it may have a file, but you didn't write the content files. Maybe marketing did or somebody internal, right? There's kind of two personas. So you may have great data storage and structure and tables, but the content of it is kind of a little janky. What we spend time on sort of upfront on here's my 20 proof of concepts, which is the one that makes sense for us, is actually stub out synthetic data with the customer. So we say, go get a couple of examples from your data, not everything, get a couple of examples, let's look at it together. We can use an LLM to restructure them, we can do it ourselves, and then we'll build a use case around it. And once we feel good that like, hey, there's a pathway, right, from getting data from point A to point B, and here's the result could be, at least we know what the effort effectively is going to be to get there. We know what the touch points are going to have to be. We can figure out, hey, is that going to take us like 3 years to build or whatever, versus something we can build in a few days. So that's one piece of it. And then the second piece of it is the data itself. You have to form a relationship, quite frankly, with the people who create the physical content that goes into the system. And I'll give you like a dumb example. Classic thing people want to do is marketing content. Make me my LinkedIn blog posts and whatever else, right? Imagine for a moment you had two products side by side in a table as a part of a PDF or a Word document. LLMs can read a table. They can do it through images. They can do it right through text, depending on how it comes out. But depending on how the information is pulled out of the system, it can actually read to some artifacts, and the result of that is a hallucination. So one of the things that we end up recommending is, sure, you have a table. Instead of it being side by side, can we make it top and bottom? So there's clear definition between the data itself. Or can we break out that document into separate documents, right, that feed up into or are sort of included in sort of the primary, and then the LLM uses the bottom tier, and then sort of the end consumer see the top. So there's like work we have to do at the content side of it that is not a technologist problem. Like we have to solve it, right? But we have to work with people who understand what that content's going to be and how it should be structured.
Okay, it's very cool. I mean, we have a couple questions in the chat about that. Here's a good question. And they asked, how do you handle and fine tune the data from a database?
Yeah, so if you're fine tuning, first let's separate two things for a moment. Probably three things now. There's fine tuning, there's distillation, and then there's RAG, right? And people oftentimes, when I meet them, they say, I want to fine tune a model to give it more knowledge about my business. And I would recommend that's probably the wrong thing to do. I'll talk about fine tuning specifically, but it's probably the wrong thing because when I look at fine tuning, I think about structure. I think about tone of voice. I think about maybe you have some homegrown JSON, XML, YAML thing that's like not industry standard, but your applications use it. That's lots of that, right? Sort of the mid-market segment in particular. Fine tuning is great for defining and understanding structure of how you want an LM to respond. It's not great for knowledge because you then have to retrain so consistently every single time new information comes in that it actually gets very expensive. So just separation of duties for a moment. Fine tuning from a database. Oftentimes, there is a particular type of format you can do for fine-tuning on top of particular models. You can do LoRa's and so forth, but more importantly, they usually look for input-output prompts. And you can define in sort of a CSV structure what your input and your output is going to be. Most companies you work with, they may have data that results in an input. Here's input of, I have this data, insert your variable, right? Format it to me in Markdown, I'm making it up, right? Or your company specific outcome. And then on the output prompt in your CSV, you give the answer that you think is appropriate for that structure, right? And you may have to repeat that thousands of times. And oftentimes now, most people are then doing synthetic data on top of that good data to then create enough permutations to fine tune, which is different than distillation. And distillation is much easier to do than fine tuning, where you take an existing model and sort of chisel it away until it's really sort of tightly compact for your particular use case. You can do distillation running the Bedrock console even today.
Yeah. Let's take another question from the audience. Let's see it. Here's a good one. So are the agents native to AWS tech or there are the options?
Yeah, so the agents inside of Tailwinds are native to Tailwinds. They're built on top of LangChain and LangGraph, which are popular frameworks. Frameworks I would not recommend for production, and that's a whole I'll do over beers kind of conversation. But there are different agent types that you can do in the market. So Amazon has Bedrock agents where you define the agents and store it directly inside of AWS. I am partial to Hugging Face's small, SMOL, small agents. They put it out a month ago. We've already deployed it to production. It is really good and really, it's like less than 1,000 lines of code, the package. So it's really, really easy to deploy in serverless infrastructure. LangGraph is very popular. Runters is part of most battle tested frameworks. So you can deploy it on serverless or into a container or otherwise. There's lots of different patterns. Quite frankly, there's probably like 8 or 9 out there in the market today, inclusive of Amazon's own native.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. So we only have a few minutes left in the segment. Can you tell us where people can find more information about Tailwind and how to get started with your tool?
Yeah. So if you're interested in the tool, which is great, you can purchase it on the Amazon Marketplace. You can search for innovative solutions, Tailwinds, and should be the first thing you see. And it's $300 a month, nothing too crazy, right? We like it because people get to experiment, and that's sort of the joy of it. If you want to talk to me, you can hit me up on LinkedIn, just Travis Rail. You'll see my pretty face. But if you want to work with innovative, because we do a lot of cool stuff, you go to innovativesol.com and you can reach out to us right there, or hit me up on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you,
This is super interesting, Travis. Like, we could definitely spend the rest of the day talking about this, and maybe someday we will.
Okay, I'm in.
but we really appreciate you coming on, sort of walking us through. Before we say goodbye, since we have like 1 minute left, last question for you. Where do you think like this conversation is going to be in like a year? I'm just like, put on your prognosticator helmet.
Okay, I'll give you the over under, right? You've got Satya on the market saying SaaS is dead, which I call FUD, right? It seems more marketing hype. Then you got people saying, agentic, which I don't like because people associate that to, you tell an agent and it'll sort of like solve the world's problems for you without you having to do anything, which is sort of unrealistic as well, right? Imagine you saying, go buy flowers for me for Valentine's Day. What color? What shape? How much you want to spend on it? Where is it going? There's always like permutations that make it wrong, and people I think will have a low tolerance level. I think the reality is agent infused workflows. I think that's truly where 2025 will land. I think you'll see, we started doing a lot of multimodal last year for like audio. You see it with like Soma has amazing sort of audio sort of song creators and things like that. But I think you'll see more multimodal sort of in the market as things like telephone poll workers want to take pictures of a poll and the job they're working on, they want to translate that structure into a database. Perfect use case for an LLM, right? So I think you'll see more of that.
All right, we'll have you back in 1 year's time. It's in the calendar, and we'll grade your forecasting ability. How about that?
Sure, I'll bring a shoe.
A cake shoe.
Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, thank you. It's really always great talking with you. Appreciate your kind of coming in here and telling us and our listeners, your take on the world.
Sure, anytime. Take it easy, guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, stay tuned to our next guest that's coming up, and we'll see you in a couple moments on AWS GenAI Live. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to this episode of GenAI Live. I am one of your hosts, Brian Terry, and I'm a senior partner specialist SA in generative AI, and I'm joined here by my good friend Wayne.
Hi, thanks, Brian, for introducing me. My name is Wayne Sachs. I'm a solutions architecture leader here at AWS. And for anybody who's just tuning in for the first time, welcome to GenAI Live. We're excited to have you. We're here to talk with our AWS partners about GenAI and what they do and problems they solve and the problems they've seen, the challenges they faced, and ultimately how we've come together to try to help our customers figure this out and get real value out of this incredible technology that we're all spending so much time thinking about. So yeah, I'm excited to have our next guest. Brian, you want to tell us who she is?
Yes. So we have a very special guest from a company I really, really just enjoy seeing what they're doing with innovation, especially around GenAI. So let's bring in our next guest, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Brian and Wayne. This is I'm Neha Bajwa. I am the Vice President here of Product Marketing at Neo4j. And it warms my heart to sort of hear you say one of your favorite companies. Yeah, so we are here to share a few things about database and data and talk about GenAI.
Super excited. Yeah, I have been a fan of Neo4j for a long time. I've been a developer for a number of years, and I've used a lot of your tools. So it's super exciting to see the innovation you guys are doing in the GenAI space.
Cool.
Yeah.
So before we really jump into the deep end, you want to tell us a little bit about Neo4j, like what you do? I think what you do is super interesting. Also, like just niche enough that I'm guessing that we've got some listeners, some audience members who aren't quite familiar with it. And let's get them familiar.
Yes, it's a good question. And I lovingly call it the oldest startup because we actually started in 2009 with a pretty innovative way of looking at data, which is basically graphs, right? Like essentially our founder, Emil, sort of had this thing that, we think about databases in the traditional sense of the world, and we all grew up with SQL, right? We sort of know, and developers, when they think about building applications, the first thought is SQL databases. But there are some problems and some challenges that are better addressed with a different kind of database. And this is really where you think about multi-hop questions, right? So when you're trying to connect data that is 3 to 5 hops away, right? So A is equal to B is equal to C is equal to D, and hence A is equal to D. In order to do that and do that reasoning, it's pretty hard. It's hard with traditional relational databases. So he basically came up with the graph data model and graph databases in 2009, and we've been very, quietly innovating since then. I think we were a little early for AI. So when AI sort of came, it's basically the perfect or an ideal, I should say, a database, especially, when you think about retrievals and really grounding and an LLM. And knowledge graphs are a very good way of doing it. And so you're sort of hearing a lot about Neo4j and graphs in general right now with GenAI. It is a developer product. It is built for developers. It's really fine-tuned for developers. So it's pretty neat that way.
Super interesting. So you said that, it works really close. It works really great with GenAI. Can you talk a little bit about the use cases or where you've seen companies kind of combining both these tools together?
Correct. Yeah, that's a good question. And the thing is, as I was saying, what graph databases are good for is when you have to connect complex data and you have to reason complex data, whether it is, we call it 3 to 5 connections wide or deep, right? Because there are so many connections and relationships. So you see that in use cases like healthcare, particularly drug and discovery, healthcare, pharmaceutical industries. You see that in manufacturing. Supply chain is a really good example when you're trying to find where your bottlenecks are and you're trying to, the London transport system is a really good example, right? They have a big network. They're trying to keep the trains running on time. They want to make sure that they are addressing and identifying bottlenecks and pretty quickly rerouting, right? So supply chain is a big use case. Fraud detection is a major use case for graph databases. This was before GenAI. Now, when GenAI comes along, the use cases don't change, right? Everyone's really trying to figure out how to apply GenAI or how to use this innovative technology in whatever they are using today. So the use cases don't really change. It is really about how do you incorporate GenAI, how do you incorporate the innovative and the creative nature of GenAI, but ground it so that you're able to provide that completeness of answer. You're able to, we call it the left brain and the right brain. So what GenAI is very good at is probabilistic, right? And these foundational models, and if you think about LLMs, they're very, very good at at probabilistic models, and they're statistical models, right? What you want to then do is combine that with a deterministic model that is in graphs or knowledge graphs, and now you have a complete set, right? You have deterministic combined with probabilistic, and that's what we are finding is where that sweet spot is. And I know your earlier guest was talking about, you guys touched upon fine-tuning and RAG, and that's the situation a lot of the companies are finding themselves in. Is fine-tuning is great to a certain extent. It's also very expensive, right? And so how do you, and you have to, like, there are constraints around fine-tuning, right? How much can you fine-tune? So the question then is, how do you augment fine-tune with a RAG technique that actually uses your proprietary data to provide that context reasoning that is required?
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. So we have. I think the group. I think we want to understand like how you guys are approaching your customers with this kind of concept. But the question, the way I'd love for you to help us think through this is, your customer comes to you with a problem. What's the problem that they're trying to solve when they're like, you're the answer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So early on, we found, like maybe 12 months ago or so, we found a lot of our customers, particularly customers who are already using graphs. So let's take financial organization. And we have examples where they're sort of saying, hey, we have all this data, we want to democratize it. So for financial analysts particularly, right? They're starting to look at it saying, oh, ChatGPT is here, or generative AI is here. Can I just slap on a chatbot, right, on top of my financial data and make it available to financial analysts? And the first thing is they experiment with vector databases, which is pretty standard, and that was what you do. And quickly we have examples after examples where customers are like, well, vector alone is not good enough, right? Because vector will provide similarity and they'll actually get you in the proximity, but it won't be able to answer the context within which that question was asked, right? And so then they are then approaching us to say, oh, can you do vector embeddings and add that graph database and create this knowledge graph? And so what then you end up doing is you combine a vector with a knowledge graph. So that's a classic example. The other examples are auto manufacturing examples. So for example, a leading auto manufacturing company in the US is looking at their supply chain, right? And so they're sort of saying, can I, in my supply chain, as the vehicle is being manufactured, can I sort of understand where we are in the process and what are the bottlenecks, so that even the customer can see that their car is being, is being designed that way. So they want to do that natural language conversational chatbot on it, because think about it, in order to get that information, you sort of need a data scientist and you need an analyst and you need this like this analytical model that cannot be changed. And when somebody asks you that question, usually the traditional way of saying it is, oh, give me 24 hours or a week and I'll get back to you. So this is what generative AI does. It provides that natural language and makes it accessible for anyone, right? So in this particular case, then they basically worked with us to create a knowledge graph with vector embedding. And so anybody can ask this question, and we are in real time, we are dynamically providing information about the supply chain. Very, very similar example, BMW is a really good example, common customer that basically uses AWS Bedrock and knowledge graphs to be able to do similar things, right? Being able to provide, in BMW example, they're actually using it for dynamically giving you the pricing information. So you can go on the website, let's say you are as a customer going on the website and saying, hey, I want this kind of car, and I want these kind of trims, and I want this kind of leather couches or leather seats or this color. Have you ever noticed the pricing changes dynamically, right? That is basically all being done through a Bedrock. Like, you're naturally putting your information in, right? Naturally asking that question. It's being done through foundational models, LLM, combined with a knowledge graph with vector. So you're sort of combining this power of this cloud-based system that AWS provides with Bedrock, and then the foundational models and knowledge graph. So that's a very classic example. And there are examples like that they happen. Now, so what are the steps? Like you said, hey, so what are the steps that happen, right? That's the natural thing. Mm-hmm. What LLMs are very good at is generating stuff, right? Generating content. So the first step is, if you think about it, you have to ingest data. Right? You have to find your data sources, both in structured, unstructured, and we call it semi-structured. So you sort of have to look for your data sources. And one of the big things about GraphRag, or this what we're talking about, whether it's BMW or whether it is this other manufacturing company, what you have to do is build a knowledge graph. The number one step of building a knowledge graph is taking that data and then creating a graph model, right? That's hard. And so in order to simplify that, you can actually use the LLM model. So a lot of our customers, like Sofik, did exactly that. What they did is they used the Anthropic model, the cloud model with Bedrock, to actually create a knowledge graph, right? You create a knowledge graph, and that gets stored in Neo4j, and now you're able to start building applications on it. So that's how it gets simplified. Like, you're sort of using LLM for what it's good at, and then you're adding the retrieval engine for other applications. Yeah. I hope that provides you a good.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. I love it.
It is. Yeah, I have a question about performance. So, like, when you combine like a graph database with an LLM, how does this help inference performance?
It's a very good question. And that is, so if you think about it, when we think about multi-hop reasoning, it can be done with the traditional database. Like, it's not like you need a graph database for it. The downside of doing it with a traditional database is performance, right? In order to you're sacrificing performance, and you're actually having to build multiple joins, and so you're sort of combining different tables, and that sort of takes up performance. So at the end of the day, it's all about feeds and speeds. And so and this is where graph really excels because of the graph traversals, right? We're sort of looking at the ultimately it's that graph model, and what graph model does is stores the relationships and the properties in the model itself. It's not actually going out and looking at a different table to be able to do joins. So you sort of you don't have joins. You're actually storing the properties and graphs right there in the model, and that makes it easy, actually fast to traverse. So the same thing then applies to your GenAI, right? Particularly this pricing data that I'm talking to you about, or other examples that we have. It turns out to be like almost 1,000 times faster than relational database because it is stored. It's that storage is still graph based, which then helps us with graph traversals. And that underlying foundation is the same for GenAI. It's a matter of storing. The difference now is with vector embeddings, you can bring in your unstructured data, and you have the structured data which already exists. And so you combine those two to provide that completeness.
Awesome. I mean, very cool. I think that's. I'm itching to kind of try this myself. This is I've kind of played with Neo4j for a long time. I've never thought about combining it with GenAI like models, and this is really cool. So.
I think the builder is like the builder in me anyway, is like itching, right, to sit down and start messing around. You talk to a lot of customers, right? Like and we talk to a lot of customers, talk to a lot of partners. And I think one of the things that our customers say to us pretty regularly is like, hey, I want to build for today, obviously, but I also want to build for tomorrow.
Correct.
Right? Like I need, like, I want to prepare myself for things that I'm not yet sure of.
Yeah.
Kind of a looking around corners scenario. So from your perspective, what are some of the corners that our customers should be anticipating to start looking around when they're either starting to build today or planning out for what they're going to build tomorrow?
That's a really good question. And what we have found, one of the things with GenAI, and this in the industry, it is moving so fast. It is incredible. The pace is like 18 months ago, we were talking about, and builders were building with vector. And vector was good, right? Because you needed the persistent memory, and vector was able to do that. And for experimentation, for that Hello app, vector is great. But then very quickly, our customers started to say, what's around that corner, to your point, right? Like the customer started to say, oh, I need to get it into production. And then you find, putting it into production, you're incomplete in your answers, the compliance is not there, the regulation is not there. So the thing about what builders need to really think about, and particularly developers, when you're building for a single app, you can use some of the innovative technologies out there which are not really ready for production, but because you're not putting it in production, so you don't have to think about compliance, you don't have to think about regulations, privacy is not a big big deal. So the big thing for us, what we say is, you particularly in the GenAI world, use technologies that are here to stay, right? And will be able to easily get into the ecosystem. And no database technology, whether it is even Neo4j, like the world doesn't exist around us, right? We are part of an ecosystem. And when developers have to really think about and partner with their data analyst or the stewards, right? The data strategy team, to say, how is this application going to be integrated into the ecosystem that the company has, right? And so with that in mind, how does this database work with other databases? How does this database work with in AWS instance with SageMaker, with Bedrock, with the other models, right? How does it all come together? That's a very important point. Then in the context of GenAI, you always, this whatever technology you use, and particularly for Neo4j, you want things that you're able to quickly innovate and iterate. So you don't want rigid models, right? So for example, you want flexible models, right? You want things that allow you to take in more data and quickly iterate on the application without going out and creating a new data model. So those are some of the databases and technologies that allow you that agility and flexibility while giving you the governance for full-scale production tomorrow, right? So that's the balance that builders have to go figure out. And then what we like to say is build, like, whatever database you're going to use to build an application should have stickiness, should be able to like answer multiple questions, not just the question you are asking right now, because questions change, right? Today, a customer is coming in like, I am a consumer. I go on Nordstrom, for example. I love that store. That's a very personal thing. I go on Nordstrom and I'm looking for a certain kind of an apparel, right? Tomorrow, my tastes are completely changed and I'm looking for a different kind of apparel, different color, different design, different thing. Now, that application needs to be able to accommodate my tomorrow's question, not just today's question, which means it needs to be flexible, it needs to be dynamic, it needs to be agile and keep evolving. And that's why, I'm a little biased here, but that's why graph database is pretty good and pretty unique in that way. And then it can complement your relational database, and together you can actually build that out. So that's the big thing for builders.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah. It's the story of using the right tool for the right problem, right?
That's right.
That's the age old.
That's right. That's right.
Truth.
That's right. And I have an example, like Sophic Alliance, for example, is a really unique company, and they are, again, common customers of ours, but a pretty unique company because they're in healthcare, but they're not a healthcare provider. They're basically a library of sorts, right? So they provide all of the information and knowledge for other healthcare providers. Now think about it. They're basically taking all of the content and structured, unstructured content. They sort of need a system that can be democratic enough, but it can answer today's questions that healthcare providers have, but it can also answer tomorrow's questions, because you don't know what the question is, right? It's a library. You go into the library, you don't know where you're going to go. Like, you have a pretty good question today, tomorrow the question may change. Now think of this as a virtual library. So what for them, it's so important to build and have the tools that they're using be flexible but accurate, right?
Yeah.
Because accuracy is so important in this particular situation. Accuracy. And the second one is explainability. That when they're giving this information, they have to be able to provide traceability. Where did they get that information from, right? And for healthcare providers, particularly, they're skeptic in nature because they have to double check and triple check their work. And so explainability, accuracy, cannot hallucinate, which is one of the challenges we have with LLMs, and build for the future, right? And that's one of the reasons why Sophic Alliance has used a graph technology alongside AWS Bedrock and all of the other tools and technologies they have to be able to provide this layer on top of other data sources. So that's the classic model that we are starting to see now. We have another example. This is a pretty cool example. In fact, we were talking to an analyst yesterday about whether this is the future. Because we're starting to see this trend where this company, and it's unfortunately I can't share the name, but it's an entertainment company. And what they do is they've created an abstract knowledge layer on top of their data sources. So their data sources, imagine, right? Their data sources are in disparate data. So they have relational databases, they have NoSQL databases, they have data lakes, they have data all over the place. And what they've done is they've created this abstract knowledge graph layer on top.
Mm.
And it's basically
Mm.
metadata management, right? So what they're
Yeah.
doing is they're essentially all of the metadata, and it's huge, but they have metadata from everywhere, and they're putting it in this knowledge graph dynamically without giving up that performance is key. Dynamically, then they put a chatbot on top of it, right? So you can converse with this knowledge graph that is literally pulling data from all of these disparate data sources.
So the
So
knowledge graph is
metadata
like pulling
management.
all this together. So it's actually gluing
Yeah.
all these data sources
That's super
together.
cool.
And that's
We were earlier
very
today. We
cool.
were talking about card catalogs, like going to a library, right? Like using a card, like an old
Yep.
card catalog, right? And now I'm thinking like, oh, these stories are it's
Yep.
the same story, but just told in at a scale that's sort of mind-bogglingly much
Exactly.
larger.
Exactly. So we have started to see this pattern emerge. And this pattern, it's when you see a pattern becomes when you have repeatable customers using it multiple times. And we've seen now it's starting to really surface to it. Metadata management was always a big use case for us. But in this context of what I'm showing you, like what I'm talking about, we have now enough customers to sort of say, there's something here. And so in that context, we were talking to an analyst to see what the next 12 to 18 months will look like.
Excellent. Wow, this is pretty cool. I love it how your solution can just glue these other data sources together, and I can see where that performance will actually just be awesome for the LLM to just kind of do that. Yeah, super exciting
So
stuff.
from your perspective, because we had a couple of sort of themes in the comments, from your perspective, does it matter what the underlying data source is in your example, or are you sort of happy and flexible based on it could be this, could be any number of things?
It doesn't. That's where the beauty of the LLM is, right? Because we are we're a knowledge graph, right? And so you build a knowledge graph. The knowledge graph, you need data, but the data can come from unstructured data. And that's, in fact, a lot of what the customers are doing. And and you use LLMs to literally create these chunks, and you're creating the structure from the unstructured by using vector embeddings, right? So that's how this unstructured data gets put into the knowledge graph. And you have structured data, which is what the most of the goodness is in the structured data. So you take the structured data. That's what we are calling mixed data. So knowledge graphs are really good with mixed data, right? And you're not storing all of the data, so that's why it's not a big a storage thing. It's more about the metadata, right? You're sort of storing the metadata of the mixed data. So it doesn't really matter what kind of data.
Awesome.
All right. You have a last question, Brian?
No, this is very useful. It's just mind blowing. I'm just kind of put it all.
No, I know I'm going to start building in 5 minutes, because that's as soon as I'm going to be into the internal account. I think then the last important thing that we need to do is thank you for coming and telling us the story, because it's inspiring and it's cool, and that's what we're here to
Thank you
hear.
so much for having me. Thank you.
I'm
All
looking
right.
forward to see what else you guys build in the future.
Yes. Now the next stage is all about agentic RAG, right? So
Yeah.
you go from vector RAG to graph RAG, and the next couple of months is all about going to be agentic graph RAG. Like, how do you combine the power of agents with knowledge graph, and how do you then use that to almost build intelligence within the database, right? So you're sort of bringing the intelligence closer, which there is a lot of intelligence in the database, but how do you sort of use that to power applications. And that's pretty cool. Like if you think about agents, right, being able to automate all the workflows, but the workflows that we were talking about, this metadata management, like is being done at all the different levels, and being able to do RAG retrievals on agents is going to be pretty cool. So that's the next big thing for us.
I cannot wait to get into that.
Yeah. All
So
right.
thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We like really appreciate it. Brian, this has been a pleasure as always. To our listeners and viewers, it's great to have you here. Join us next week, same time, same station, for another Gen AI Live. And I think that's us.
Thank you so much. It was so good to be here and talk to you guys both.